Hello, I am Dr. Keith Burke. I'm a professor of behavioral sciences in the Alcohol and Other Drug Studies program at San Diego City College. The AODS program is a state-funded vocational job training program for students who wish to become certified alcohol and drug counselors in the state of California. The AODS classes offer all of the coursework necessary to sit for the state certification exam, as well as are worth college credit for those students who are interested in pursuing higher educational goals. So today I am going to talk about assessing for key family dynamics when doing family counseling in a drug treatment facility. All right, so when doing assessment in working with families in a substance use treatment facility, like all forms of assessment, the assessment is done in order to develop a treatment plan to determine what we're going to do to address the issues or the concerns of the client or clients in front of us. So it's the same thing in family counseling. In order to develop a treatment plan, we need to first assess for the major or primary issues and problems and strengths that we see in the family system. While you will be able to identify some problems and strengths from what the family tells you about, many family dynamics are going to be found by observing how the family is interacting with each other in session in the moment. What I mean by that is that assessment, in the process of gathering information, we're going to ask questions. How can I be helpful? What are the primary concerns in the family right now? How's everybody doing now that mom is in treatment? Those questions are designed to get us information about how the family is functioning. But we're going to see things that aren't going to necessarily be brought up by questions. We may notice that dad is really withdrawn in the session. We may notice that mom is really dominating the session. We may notice that our adolescent client, we're in an adolescent outpatient treatment program, pulls out her phone and starts playing on her phone, while mom and dad are answering questions. There's many things that will happen while a family is sitting in front of you, and you're going to pick up on some dynamics simply by observing the family in the moment. Now, a family dynamic or a relational dynamic, they're really the same thing. It's just a relational dynamic in the context of a family system. It's simply a pattern or a style of interacting or relating with another family member. So mom having an alcohol use disorder is not a family dynamic. That's a statement about mom and a substance use disorder that mom has. Mom dominating the family discussion when you attempt to ask questions of the other people, that is an example of a family dynamic. Mom and dad not talking about the fact that her drinking has gotten consistently worse over the last couple of years. That's a pattern or a style of interacting or relating with another family member, which is a dynamic. So there are many different family dynamics in any given family system. When we're talking about family dynamics for this lecture, we're simply talking about a pattern or a style of interacting or relating with other family members. Now, a single incident that serves as an exception rather than a pattern of interaction between family members is usually less of a concern when we're counseling families, although that exception still may need to be assessed and addressed. What I mean by that is that if there is a style of interacting between mom and dad that they just simply do not talk about her substance use, save for the fact that dad blew up about it shortly before mom entered treatment, after she took out the brand new family car and got into a car accident while driving under the influence of alcohol. So that would be an exception. In that one instance, dad did address this, but for the majority of the time, this was not talked about between the two of them. So that would be an example of a single incident exception. What we're primarily interested in, though, when we're working with families in a substance use treatment setting is a pattern of interaction that happens consistently, often, for the last couple decades, right? Things like that is what we're usually primarily concerned with, because families will tend to go back into whatever that existing pattern of relating with each other is. But we still should talk about the exception, assess the nature of that exception, why did that happen, and potentially address that in a family counseling session. Now, counselors working with families are always on the lookout for key family dynamics, because inevitably, while the one or more family members' substance use affects the family system itself will affect the substance use. So we are going to not only be focused on the substance use of the person who's in our treatment facility, but if we have a family sitting there in front of us, we are going to be on high alert and paying very close attention to key family dynamics we're seeing in this family system. Now, part of doing this means we have to recognize the difference between process and content. So content in any kind of a counseling session is the subject being discussed. So the content is essentially what they're talking about. So when we're doing an assessment with a family system, asking them questions in order to try and identify information, areas of concern, family strengths, et cetera, that's the content. That's the topics that are being discussed. That's what the family is actually talking about. Process is the nature of the interactions between family members. So when we're looking at the process in the family, it's really more about how the family is interacting with each other in the moment. You can choose to focus on one or the other. It's not that content is inappropriate when doing an assessment. It's totally appropriate to focus on whatever the topic of discussion is. But the process is really important, and we always want to be aware of the process even when we're focused on the content, because the process usually holds the truth of what the family system dynamics are. The process often also has the truth when, for example, they're giving off a nonverbal signal that somehow contradicts what they're actually saying. So maybe the 17-year-old, in the family system, we'll just stay with mom's got an alcohol use disorder. She's in substance use treatment. The 17-year-old is here at a family counseling session. The counselor says, so David, how are you feeling about being here? I've noticed you haven't said much. And David says, fine, it's fine. But you notice David won't look you in the eyes. He's got his arms crossed. He keeps staring at the clock. He looks visibly uncomfortable. So the content, right, what he's saying is that he's fine, but the process or how he's acting definitely indicates that he's not fine. And most of the time, the process has the truth. So when we're assessing family dynamics, there's multiple things that we want to be able to consider. The first, obviously, is what is the nature of this relational dynamic? So if every time that I try to ask questions of the family, mom jumps in and answers for them. Mom is my client. Mom has the alcohol use disorder. She's the one in treatment. And I'm trying to get information from dad and her son, who's here in a family counseling session, and she keeps answering the questions for them. That's what the dynamic is. Mom won't let the others speak. Mom answers all the questions for them. But we also need to assess, why is this happening? So just identifying the dynamic itself is usually not good enough. We need to also assess and hypothesize, in many cases, why might this be happening here? And the hypothesis of why it might be happening is going to drive the next questions. So we may share our observation. Mom, I'm noticing that every time I've asked dad and your son their thoughts about this, you've tended to jump in and comment for them. I'm wondering if you're afraid or concerned about what they might say, so you're trying to answer for them. The great thing about doing an interpretation when you're doing assessment, really when you're doing any counseling work in general, is if your interpretation is right, then the person is going to say, yeah, that's it, which is great. But if your interpretation is wrong, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, no, that's not it. And then they're going to tell you what it is, which is great. So we got the answer that we're looking for simply by making the interpretation and having them correct us. So why is it happening? Really important to determine. How does this relational dynamic affect the family system or control the family system or support the family system? What we're talking about here is more of a potentially dysfunctional family dynamic where mom is answering questions every time I try to query dad and her son. But I want to look at the family system as a whole. What happens when she does that? Do they act totally nonplussed about it? This is just normal. They don't even think about it. Maybe it's comfortable for them. They can settle back in the background because mom's always the one that's answering questions when, talking to strangers or something like that. Or it may be a case where it looks like it's controlling the family system in some ways. Or it could be a healthy dynamic, where maybe what I notice is mom herself is, so I ask the son, how do you feel about being here? He says it's fine. And maybe the mom says, honey, you're obviously not fine. I know you didn't want to come to this session. It's totally appropriate to talk to the counselor about it. And I mean, you're upset. It's okay. I understand why you're upset. Okay. The what of that relational dynamic is, mom's being pretty supportive. Mom's essentially interpreting what her son looks like. Mom is providing encouragement. Why is this happening? Maybe mom's really starting to buy into this whole recovery process. Maybe she's learned some things since she's been in treatment. Maybe she really does care about what her son says and what his viewpoint is. How is this dynamic affecting, controlling, or supporting the family system? In this case, it's really supporting the family system, she's making sure that her son has an appropriate voice. And so that kind of gives it the last one. Is this family dynamic that we're observing helpful? Or is this family dynamic not helpful or potentially maladaptive? All right, what's happening in my slide here? There we go. All right, so common family dynamics that we see in pretty much all family systems. There are many different kinds of family dynamics out there in all kinds of family systems. Some of them are healthy, some of them are dysfunctional, but there's, hundreds, maybe thousands of different dynamics in any one given family system. But all families have variations of these types of family dynamics. So styles of communicating, how they communicate, nonverbal or unspoken signals that they give to each other, rules and roles in the family system. We'll talk more about that in just a second. How the family addresses conflict. Every single family system out there has conflict at some point. So how they address the conflict is a family dynamic. How does the family deal with boundaries and alliances? We'll talk more about that in this lecture as well. And how does the family express affection or distance with other family members? So there are many other variations of family dynamics other than just these that are not necessarily covered in this lecture. But when we are doing an assessment of a family system, every single family system is going to have some variation of these particular common family dynamics: styles of communication, nonverbal signals, rules and roles, ways of addressing conflict, boundaries and alliances, and expressions of affection or distance. All right, so let's talk about styles of communication. Most family communication can be broken down into two domains. Communication consists of talking, and listening. So healthy talking in a family system simply means being able to clearly speak what's on your mind, share what your observations or concerns are, identify your feelings. So being able to talk about it. In a healthy family system, people are able to talk about things. They're able to address things directly. They're able to say when they're upset about something or confused about something. They can share what's on their mind without fear of being, shot down or told to stop talking. So talking is just that, communicating, right? Putting out there whatever it is that's on your mind. The other part of communication is listening. So talking and listening are the two main domains, and healthy listening requires you to actively attempt to hear and acknowledge what other family members are saying. So really listening means I'm making a point of trying to hear what you're saying. Somebody might be in a room with me as I'm talking, and they might even say, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually actively listening to what I'm saying. So in a family system, in a healthy family system, healthy listening means that the family members are actively attempting to hear what the other person says and acknowledge what the other person's saying. And it means that everybody in the family system also has an equal voice and an ability to speak without being shut down or interrupted or passed over. So if somebody starts to talk and I interrupt them to shut them down, then I'm not listening to what they have to say. So in a healthy family system, we don't have this happening as much. Now, many families in substance use treatment have communication challenges where either or both the talking and the listening domains are dysfunctional and creating additional problems in the family system aside from the substance use. So there's many ways that dysfunctional communication shows up in families who are in substance use treatment, but certainly misunderstandings, yelling at each other, withdrawing, giving each other the silent treatment, holding grudges, blaming, name calling, or other ways of being abusive in your speech, passive aggressive statements or actions, keeping and hiding family secrets, using ultimatums or threats, harming another person. These are all problematic styles of communicating. But it's important to note that families in substance use treatment are in treatment usually because, or in part, there has not been clear communication. Using the example that I've started with, let's say that it's mom who's developed an alcohol use disorder and is in treatment. The vast majority of the time, the family system has somehow supported this or allowed this to continue and go on. It probably has not been talked about. It probably has been avoided in some ways or enabled in other ways. There probably hasn't been listening when concerns have been expressed about this. And so it's what we do. A big part of what we do when we're working with families in substance use treatment is help them with their communication, which usually entails those two parts. We help them either with being able to talk about things in a clear and acceptable way, or we encourage them and teach them how to listen to each other and acknowledge the other person's viewpoints. Now, the third domain of family communication is nonverbal or unspoken messages and body language, which deliver messages in their own way. In other words, like nonverbal signals can be seen as more of a type of talking. A nonverbal signal could mean furrowing your brow and frowning, right, when somebody says something. It could mean like, oh my God, right? Like, rolling your head to the side and looking to the heavens because what the person said, you're communicating, you think was absolutely ridiculous. It could be not making eye contact. It could be crossing your arms and staring off into the horizon. I mean, there's many, many ways that people can give nonverbal signals. But nonverbal signals as a type of communication are also delivering messages that we need to assess and determine in a family counseling setting. So sometimes the nonverbal signals are delivering a new message, something that we haven't heard before. Maybe they're using a nonverbal signal instead of actually talking about something. Shrugging your shoulders without saying something is a way of talking using a nonverbal signal. Nonverbal signals can also repeat a verbal message in some way, meaning that the nonverbal signal is saying the same thing. Sometimes nonverbal signals can contradict what the person's saying. So again, I asked the son how he feels about being here, and he says it's fine, but his body language is giving a contradictory message. Sometimes a nonverbal signal will substitute for talking. Instead of talking, maybe the family's there and there's a somewhat younger child, who pulls their phone out and mom gives the icy stare at them and they put their phone away, which is a way of substituting, right? She didn't have to say it aloud. She said it with her eyes and delivered a message. Or the nonverbal signal can complement or accent or emphasize a spoken message. If dad says, I've had enough, but he then also slams his palms against his thighs when he says this, then he's using a nonverbal signal to complement or accent what he's saying. Now, there's many different kinds of nonverbal signals, but it includes facial expressions, eye contact or lack of eye contact, touch, gestures, body posture, voice tone. These are all examples of nonverbal signals. So when we're assessing a family system, we want to assess and observe how are they talking to each other, how are they listening to each other, what types of nonverbal signals are they giving off, and how does this communication, or what does this communication say to us about the family dynamics? All right, so let's talk about family rules and family roles. This is really important when assessing for family dynamics, and they both have a very strong impact in homeostasis and how a family addresses conflict. So all families will experience stressors, and all families will try to maintain some kind of homeostasis. So homeostasis is a phrase in family counseling that essentially says that family systems will develop complex ways of behaving and interacting with each other in an attempt to balance or find stability, particularly in the face of a stressor. So healthy homeostasis, might be talking about something directly. Maybe a not so healthy state of homeostasis is that you see a problem developing and you pretend that problem doesn't exist. In both cases, the attempt is to deal with the stressor to maintain some kind of balance or stability. But the way or the manner in which stressors are dealt with defines whether or not the family system is healthy or dysfunctional. So healthy families typically deal with stressors directly by using clear communication, acceptance of differences of opinions, and collective problem solving within the family system. Dysfunctional families typically do not use clear communication, acceptance of a difference of opinions, and collective problem solving. And that by itself will define whether this is a healthy or a dysfunctional way of being with each other. Now, family systems will generally address stress and conflict by following a predictable set of rules that dictate how the family should react. Now, when I say family rules, I'm not talking about a list on the refrigerator of 14 things that you do and you don't do. Family rules are often known and understood in the family system, but they may be spoken aloud or they may be unspoken. Children learn rules for sure from their parents, and in almost all family systems, don't do that, stop that, right? That's teaching them a certain rule. This is not appropriate in this situation in this family system. But again, there's a lot of interpretation and inferring about what the rules are, based on how others are reacting, the type of response you get, the nonverbal signals that they're giving you. So when we talk about a predictable set of rules, there are many rules that any one family will use in order to maintain stability. And family members, once they understand those rules, will tend to follow them. So we don't talk about mom's drinking would be an example of probably an unspoken rule, but maybe the son has really witnessed how dad has dealt with mom's drinking over the last couple of years. And so that seems to be the way we handle it in this family. So he doesn't address it either. Now, note that the family rules will often include specific roles for the individual family members to act out to try and maintain stability. In this case, if mom's alcohol use disorder has really spun out of control, the dad may be leaning on the son in some ways to help carry the weight in the household, to take on, a certain amount of chores, to be another semi-adult in the family that dad can talk to about his feelings. I mean, there's many ways that this might happen, but what it may do is thrust a role upon the son that he's expected to play out in this family to try and maintain stability. So let's talk about family rules and homeostasis a little more here. So most family rules, as I mentioned previously, about how members are expected to act and interact with each other are unspoken and often unconscious, meaning that it's not something that they're super aware of. They just know that this is the way that we do things. Now, most families have rules about things like how stressful topics are handled in the family. We deal with, we talk about things in this family. What's going on with you? You look stressed out, or like, don't talk about it, defer to your mother, like wait till dad gets home. There are rules about the position and the responsibilities for each individual family member. Maybe the eldest daughter knows that she is expected to take care of the rest of the children, help them with their homework and get them ready for school. There's rules about how to express feelings such as love and hurt and anger. Some families, it might feel awkward to say I love you, or for the son to hug their father, right, or something like that. That's the type of rule that's been communicated in this family. We don't really do these things. Or maybe the family system, has learned when you're feeling hurt and upset, you're left alone to deal with that. Don't bring that to mom and dad, because they're going to say that they don't care, or you need to figure it out on your own, or something along those lines. Or it might be the opposite. It might be a healthy family system where there's, hey, we hug each other after we have an argument. Or I'm concerned when you look upset. I want to hear about, what's going on. Some families might be you are not allowed to express anger to, the parents. In other families, it might be you need to express your anger and talk about what's going on with your mom. So different rules for different families. There's also rules about when and how family members are expected or not to comment on what they see or think, meaning you are expected to and or allowed to talk about what you're seeing, or you are not expected to or not allowed to talk about what you're seeing. Who can speak to whom about different topics. This is between me and your mother. Leave me alone. Don't ask me about that. Who can express feelings in different circumstances, how they are expressed, how they're expected to be received by family members. Lots of families have rules regarding gender, right? So it might be appropriate for the daughter to express her feelings, to be upset, about the way that her best friend talked to her, but it's not okay for the boy to do the same thing. So, like, in other words, the daughter's crying because, what her best friend said was hurtful, and the son's crying because what his best friend said was hurtful. And there might be a rule in this family that, sons are not allowed to cry because they've got hurt feelings from their friends. How someone's allowed to acquire or express self-identity or self-worth, or what roles, behaviors are appropriate. Again, there may be gender rules, there may be sexuality rules about what behaviors are appropriate. Maybe there's rules in the family about what somebody's allowed to wear as they're leaving the house. Maybe dad stops the 16-year-old as she's walking out the door because he says, "Where do you think you're going? That shirt is too short," right? Or you're showing your belly, or something like that. That would be a rule regarding, perhaps both gender and sexuality here. How you're allowed to acquire or express self-identity or self-worth. Many times families have rules about what you're doing is appropriate or not appropriate. Maybe, there's this son is very artistic, loves drawing, is in high school, junior in high school, makes a comment about, I'd love to go to, art school when I'm done with high school. And maybe dad says, art school, I'm not paying for art school. You want to go to college, like, I'll pay for business classes, but I'm not paying for stupid art, right? What are you going to do with that in your life? And so that's a rule essentially about the way that what you're identifying with is not okay. And I'm going to tell you, what you should have worth about instead. So there's many, 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 many rules that families develop and use to function together. So when doing a family assessment, the clinician is going to attempt to identify by asking, observing, interpreting whatever the rules are that the family has in place, and to try and determine whether these rules are healthy or helpful, or if they're maladaptive, problematic for one or more members, or dysfunctional. And especially when we have a family member in substance use treatment, there are undoubtedly going to be rules that we discover where we may need to create new rules, or modify existing rules, or get rid of certain rules. Like, one rule we may have to get rid of is we don't talk about mom's alcohol use, because that may have inadvertently enabled mom to continue drinking. And so maybe in this family system now there's a new rule and a new agreement that if we're concerned that mom might be drinking again, we're allowed to bring it to her attention. In a healthy family system, in times of stress, there are usually family rules used to maintain stability in these particular domains. Healthy family systems tend to have rules about clear communication. We talk about things in this family system. Everybody's allowed to bring up differences of opinions. There's usually rules about accepting everybody's feelings. We may not agree with their feelings, but everybody's allowed to their feelings. There's rules about expressing empathy and caring. That's your brother. You should care about what's going on with your brother. Genuine interest and inquiry into other family members' current state of being, meaning that in a healthy family system, that's encouraged and expected, that other family members are gonna ask, how are you? What's going on? You look upset. Rules about collective problem solving, we solve problems together, and stable and appropriate family rules and roles, meaning we're not asking the 12-year-old eldest daughter to act like a pseudo parent because dad's heroin use disorder is such that mom needs some kind of help. Now, in a dysfunctional family, the rules usually serve to keep things stable, like constant, not changing, without actually addressing the underlying issues. So we see a lot of these types of rules, these dysfunctional family rules, when we're working with families in substance use treatment. Rules like maintain the code of silence, we don't talk about this. Rules about using power to control a situation without solving it. Typically, discussing feelings is not encouraged or allowed. The danger of talking about feelings in a family system where there's substance use that's developed into the level of a severe substance use disorder is that talking about feelings tend to bring the issues front and center. And there's usually some rules around not doing that. And rules around avoiding change. Changing would mean learning and implementing a different way of living. There's a lot of interesting research that shows that families where there's a substance use disorder, and not just a substance use disorder, but mental health disorders, other types of chronic stressors on a family system, the family tends to be less flexible, meaning they're less willing to try something new, do something new, even if what's happening doesn't seem like it serves the family system very well. Because changing, there's often a fear that it might make things worse. There's a saying in our field that families will often take the devil that they know over the devil that they don't. Now, the other thing that rules often do is they serve to keep people in their places with narrowly defined family roles, meaning this is what you do, this is what you're supposed to do, don't question this, this is what's expected and needed in this family right now. I'll go back to the example that the 12-year-old eldest daughter is expected to be a pseudo parent to her children, or the parent's children. That would be keeping her in her place with, this is what your job is. You're the big sister, you take care of everybody else. Now, when substance use is present, the rules often are designed to minimize the unstable situation related to the substance misuse or enable the user by avoiding confrontation. Those are kind of like two sides of the same coin. But what's happening is the situation involving the substance misuse, right, the addiction, there's a minimization about the things related to that. So if mom with her alcohol use disorder, accidentally crashes the family car, that might be hushed up, or, she, drove into a stop sign, a couple blocks from home and didn't report it and put the car in the garage. And maybe what's happening is dad, says like, okay, I got a buddy, works on cars. I'll see if I can get him fixed. And nobody really addresses the fact that she actually drove into the stop sign, right? That would be minimizing the unstable situation related to the substance use, and enabling the user, in this case, by avoiding confronting her about the alcohol. Now, a common rule in families where substance abuse is present is that you do not talk about or directly confront any issues, not just the substance use. If there's other big issues, you don't talk about that, even when it's obvious to everybody, to avoid tipping the balance, right? So we're back to maintaining homeostasis again. Now, research indicates that children in families where substance abuse is present often learn these rules. Don't talk about what's happening. You need to detach or repress your feelings to deflect attention. Use accomplishments as a way to deflect negative attention toward yourself, and learn to trust only yourself. Be self-reliant and control everything because the parents are unpredictable. Dr. Claudia Black is a very prominent researcher into families where there's substance use disorders. She's published many books. So she was the one that first found, working with families, particularly originally she did a research where there was alcoholism or an alcohol use disorder, many of the children in these families were embodying these roles. All right, denying issues or concerns. So we need to recognize that when a family is denying a problem, it's a defense mechanism. So denial is a type of defense that often is a distortion of thinking, right? In most normal circumstances, if somebody crashes the car into a stop sign, right, we'd be like, whoa, what happened? Why did this person crash? What's going on? But in this case, dad may be like, oh, well, it's okay, wish you hadn't done that, but I got a buddy that can fix the car. It's a distortion in thinking, right? And it's designed to protect something. So we always, when we see denial when working with family systems, need to determine what is the family trying to protect by not dealing with this particular problem. And most of the time in the work that we're doing, the system is designed to protect homeostasis and not directly addressing the substance use disorder itself. Now, it's an expectation with both individuals and with families, and note that the denial may or may not be fully conscious. Oftentimes, denial is driven by fear or uncertainty as a strategy to keep things the way that they are. Sometimes denial may be necessary in order to maintain some kind of a family alliance as well. So, son, we're not going to talk about what's happening with your mom. I need your help with this. I need you to help me to buff this out. All right, so closely related to denial of a problem is resistance to changing the situation. Resistance can be seen as a negative response to taking action or doing something that somebody else wants you to do, meaning that I don't want to take action or do something that somebody else may want me to do. Resistance may be based on not yet being able to do something or feeling inadequate or unprepared. Or as a strategy for maintaining stability. Again, I'll take what I know over that which I don't. And sometimes resistance indicates there may be some other hidden factors in play. So like if you're working with a family in a substance use treatment facility and the family agrees, it'd be really super helpful for the family to all go to an Al-Anon meeting together. And they say they're going to do that. And you say, great, I'll check up with you next week. And then they come back and they say, yeah, no, we didn't do that. We need to see that as, okay, there might be some kind of resistance here. We need to figure out what was stopping that. What are the factors that might be there? And maybe the family's afraid that by going to the Al-Anon meeting was going to bring a lot of stuff up and they just don't feel ready to deal with that. Now, note that in terms of existing homeostasis or the existing rules that were used to try and maintain homeostasis, when a family member enters treatment, this is often going to require the entire family to change the rules about how they function. This is normal, and this can definitely be healthy if we can change dysfunctional rules for healthy rules. Dysfunctional rule like we don't talk about what's happening in the family system to a healthy rule of we talk about what's happening in the family system, we ask other family members. So the goal is to help the family identify the dysfunctional rules and their impacts and come up with a plan to create new rules, noting that implementing new rules always takes time and practice. If a family's been doing the same thing the same way for the last 10 years, coming up with a new way of doing things with you in a counseling session doesn't mean they're going to immediately implement that. There's probably going to have to be repetition, readdressing it in session, and lots of practice. All right. So let's talk about family roles. So a role in general helps to establish an identity orientation, how you see yourself in a particular role. What I mean by identity orientation is that it's a way of self-identifying, this is who I am. Everybody listening to this lecture has multiple roles that they play in their life. So for me, for example, I have a role as a professor and trainer. That's really kind of what I'm in my role right now. And that's a type of identity. I identify like, yes, this is what I do. I'm a professor. I'm a trainer. I'm also a husband. I'm also a father. I'm also an outdoorsman, a backpacker. I have lots of different roles that I use, and each one of those roles establish a type of identity orientation. I define myself in parts, by my roles. This is true for everybody out there. We tend to define ourselves, at least in part, by our roles. Now, roles also establish a set of behaviors, duties, norms, and expectations for how the person is supposed to act in that role. And people will generally conform to role expectations, and they behave in a predictable way based on the role that they adopt or they're assigned. So what I mean by that is that whatever your role is, there's usually an understood way of acting or behaving when you're in that role. So students have a role. So when college students have a role. So when somebody enters college or they start taking college classes, they know that there's a set of behaviors and norms and expectations for how they're supposed to act. And most people, before they come to their first college class, they go out and they get a notebook or they get a laptop because they know that they're going to have to take notes. They know that the expectation is that they're supposed to sit in the classroom and the teacher or the professor is going to talk with them and give lessons or lectures or teach them. Most students don't expect that the first day of class, they're supposed to stand up in front of the class, right, and lead the first lecture. So the idea is that roles come with these existing behaviors and expectations for how you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do. And people generally conform to their role expectations and they behave in the way that they are assigned. Now, much of this may be unconscious. I made a career change when I became a professor. I had worked as a clinician and I worked as an administrator, as a director for a long time. And, stepping into my professor role was a different kind of role, but I knew kind of right off the bat, okay, so this is what I'm going to need to do. I'm going to have to organize trainings and lectures, and I'm going to have to attend staff meetings and figure out how the department runs. And it's not like anybody gave me a list of, okay, here's what you need to do now that you're in the role of a professor. So this is an important thing for all of us to understand, is that people are subconsciously pressured to conform to the expectations of the role that they find themselves in. What I mean by subconsciously pressured is that it isn't a fully conscious awareness, but people fall into, or they're pressured to fall into, sometimes just internally pressured to fall into whatever the expectations are for that role. So supervisors generally try to act like a supervisor. Anybody who's listening to this lecture who's been in a manager or supervisor role before, you will remember that at one point in your life, you had not been a supervisor or a manager. And the day that you got hired as a supervisor or a manager, you started acting differently. And you probably weren't given a list of this is what supervisors do, versus the regular staff. Right, you suddenly started acting like a supervisor because you stepped in that role. Again, students generally act like students when they take on the student role. Now, this is also true for family roles. So new fathers generally try to act like a father based upon whatever they think the expectations are for that role. They will certainly use their own experience, perhaps, of seeing how their father acted and either being or not being like their father, or they've seen other fathers out there, or they've watched television, right? There's ways that people gather this expectation of how fathers act. And when somebody becomes a new father, they will generally try to act like the father. Now, all roles have specific behavior expectations that are going to shape the actions and expressions. So, student, professor, we've talked about. Police officers. When somebody gets hired as a police officer, they start acting like a police officer. Politicians act like politicians. Accountants act like accountants. Father, mother, eldest children. There are certain behavior expectations for eldest children that are different from the baby of the family. And it's not just an external pressure that's coming upon them. Eldest children tend to act like the eldest children. Babies in the family tend to act like the babies in the family. Heroes, villains, victims, bullies, sidekicks, they all have role expectations. Now, that's a big preamble. So it's going to lead us into family roles. And remember that family roles are coming with a set of expectations that the person will tend to follow, whatever the expectations are. Now, how family roles develop within a family system is going to depend on a lot. It's going to depend on the particular family system itself. It's going to depend on family of origin, values, and expectations. It's going to depend on sociocultural influences. Like, for example, when we look at world cultures, in patriarchal cultures, men tend to have the authority in the family system. But there are some countries that tend to have more matriarchal cultures where the women tend to have more authority in the family system. Who has the power? So there are some common family system roles in Western cultures. What I mean by Western cultures, the United States, Canada, North American, Western European in particular, these are more Western cultures. There are some family roles that we tend to see in these cultures. Fathers are generally expected to generate income one way or another. So in our culture, most of the time, the father is expected to generate the income. Even in families where both the father and the mother, right, or there's the parents are both generating income, there's often an expectation that the father needs to either make more income, right, or carry his weight in some way. I've personally had a number of men that I've seen in my private practice when I work as a therapist that have struggled with this, that have been in families, where their spouses made more money than they did. And that was a source of stress because their minds are conforming to this expectation or pressure that they're expected to be income generators. Mothers in the Western cultures are expected to be the primary caretakers for the children, even if she's working full time. If both dad and mom are working full time, there's an expectation that mom is still the one that has primary caretaking for the children. Again, not that there aren't exceptions to this, there's always exceptions, but when we're talking about, broadly amongst, the millions of people that are living, for example, in the United States, you'll see most of the time these common family system roles. Firstborn children are generally pushed to be high achievers. This is thought to be the result of the first child being the one to receive the parents' high expectations, meaning that when parents have their first kid, they tend to dump a whole lot of expectations and hopes and dreams onto that first child. And there's no other child around when the first child's there, at least for the first 9 months, or in most cases, longer than that. And so the first child gets all the parents' initial high expectations. And then when a second child comes and a third child comes, right, there's often less of this high expectation pressure. Eldest daughters are often encouraged to help parent younger siblings. That's also a Western culture role. Not always eldest sons, but definitely eldest daughters are encouraged to be kind of a pseudo parent. Middle children in Western cultures are often set up for competition and comparison with their older children, with their older siblings, meaning that, I was an eldest child in my family, and I know my brother was 2 years younger than I was. And as I moved through school, inevitably, he'd end up having teachers who had me. And then it was like, oh, you're Keith's brother. Keith did really great in this class. I'm sure you'll do well too, right? That's setting up middle children for competition and comparison, which typically will cause some stress. Now, let's talk about family roles in families with substance use disorders. So there's a whole lot of research that's been done into this. So Virginia Satir, who did a lot of research into family systems and family therapy in general, Sharon Wegschneider-Cruz, and then, as I previously mentioned, Claudia Black, they all did research into the roles that people play in families when there's substance use disorders. And essentially, they all found the same thing, that when a family system is put under stress, for example, like from a substance use disorder, the members tend to start to take on or develop these survival roles. I'm pretty sure it was Virginia Satir that first called them survival roles for the family system, so that the family can maintain homeostasis. So these survival roles essentially are a type of coping mechanism, and they often lend some stability to the dysfunctional family system, but it comes at a cost. The person who's thrust into a role loses a true self sense. They're often locked into a role that will often include blocked expressions of feelings. So I gave an example earlier on, the 12-year-old eldest daughter becomes kind of a pseudo parent, which is related in part to the fact that, dad's got a heroin use disorder, and he's disappeared and he's kind of out of the picture. And, mom's essentially working as a single parent and she's busy and stressed, and somebody needs to pick up the pieces and help be kind of like a parent. And so that eldest daughter being thrust into a role of becoming parentified, right, or like a pseudo parent being asked to take care of the kids, these three researchers would say that is a coping mechanism for the family, and it's thrusting the eldest daughter into this survival role to lend stability to the family, but it's going to come at a cost to the daughter herself. She's not allowed to be who she would normally be as a 12-year-old because she's forced to take on these additional roles, and she probably is in a position where she feels like she can't really complain about that. Now, when a family member is in a survival role, it is often a difficult role for them to be in, and it tends to often cause relationship and identity problems in other areas of their life. So the person in the survival role may feel hurt or angry or resentful, powerless, trapped, guilty, afraid, anxious, depressed, lonely, rejected, defensive, etc. The idea is that they didn't ask necessarily to be thrust into this role. The family is demanding that they get in this role because that's what the family needs to maintain stability. And without intervening, these children who are in these roles may grow into adults who are pressured, status concerned, anxious, and ultimately unsatisfied. Again, those three researchers I mentioned previously wrote a lot about this. If you're interested in the survivor roles, any one of those three said a whole lot about them. So there are some common roles that have been identified in families where there are substance use disorders. This is not an exhaustive list. There are other roles out there. And somebody can be in two roles at the same time, or a family system might not actually have a role. So as I start talking about these, for example, I'll talk about the family hero. I'll also talk about the mascot. And somebody watching this lecture may think, well, I feel like that was me. I was kind of both the family hero and I was the mascot in my family system. And that's totally fine and cool, right? That happens. That sometimes people take on multiple roles. Sometimes roles change. Maybe somebody's in the role of the family hero and then they they're stuck in the scapegoat in some way. So it's not like these roles are written in a very firm way. What these are tendencies or types of roles that the researchers I mentioned previously have discovered just sort of spontaneously emerging in families where there's substance use disorders. So let's talk about them. All right, so the dependent. The substance user in the family is often referred to as the dependent. This is the person who takes all of the focus of the family. Sometimes by not dealing with it, you're still taking on the focus of the family. And essentially the dependent comes from not just that they may be physically dependent upon a substance, but that the family dynamics have really been designed to deal or not deal with this particular person's situation. Like the whole family system is dependent in some way on this person in needing to develop certain dynamics to accommodate this person, which often masks other family system problems. And so the dependent in the family system or the substance user can present in many different ways. There's no common characteristics. But note, the dependent tends to create a codependency with at least one other family member. So codependency is a phrase that's thrown around a lot in the world that we work in. It means a lot of different things, but one of the origins of this came out of family roles where families have a substance use disorder, where the dependent becomes codependent on another family member, usually the chief enabler, which I'll talk about, or the family hero. But the codependency is like an alliance that both enables and allows the dependent to remain in the problem. In other words, keep using, right, if it's the substance use, and effectively stays in that role, which keeps the family in a state of dysfunctional homeostasis. Sometimes that dependent role is really important because the homeostasis has evolved around this. Like, let's say for example, I'll keep using the one I said. So maybe mom has an alcohol use disorder. She is in substance use treatment. And dad has really developed a close relationship, with the 17-year-old son over the course of the last couple of years, because mom's been kind of checked out, right? She's been drinking, maybe she's been in and out of treatment, not available, home drunk. I mean, there's a lot of things that could have happened where, dad and the son have developed a close relationship. And in some ways, the family's functioning, maybe dysfunctional in many ways, but it's functioning. Let's say mom goes to treatment, she gets sober, she's working a program of recovery, and she's now trying to re-engage with her son as a parent. Well, the son may resist that, and the husband may resist that, right? Or the father may resist that, because that's infringing in some ways upon the pattern of relating between the father and the son that's been established, which was a type of homeostasis. Okay, so moving on to the chief enabler. The chief enabler is the one that tends to enable the most, and the chief enabler tends to shelter the dependent from experiencing the negative consequences of their behavior. So what that means is that an enabler allows a person to keep doing what they're doing, and they shield that person from having negative consequences or punishments. So the example I mentioned earlier, mom drives into a stop sign because she's driving drunk. She dents the car. She brings the car home and she puts it in the garage. And dad says, God, I know somebody that'll fix that. I'll take it to him. There's no negative consequences then in that setting for the fact that mom was out driving the car drunk and drove into a stop sign. And so in this case, dad is the chief enabler. Dad is shielding the dependent from experiencing negative consequences associated with that behavior. So dad's not calling the police. Dad's, not reporting a crime. Dad's not challenging mom or taking away her keys or whatever. And what that's doing is allowing this to continue instead of mom going through a painful corrective experience, which may be necessary and sometimes to break the state of homeostasis. The chief enabler's role is to reduce tension by smoothing things over or by denying problems, often tries to control the situation without actually confronting it directly. And many times the chief enabler is the person who takes on the family's administrative responsibilities. They're the one that's making sure that things still happen, bills still get paid, children get up and go to school, things like that. They become like the chief administrator too. The family hero is typically the person in the family system who does everything right and is dependent and reliable and responsible. So many times the family hero is a child in the family system, and they're the ones that, while, if the user is another family or another child, or if the user is one of the parents, the family hero is the one that's dependable. They're the one we can count on. They're the one who's responsible. They often may serve as a surrogate for the dependent, meaning that they kind of take on that role or form an alliance with the chief enabler. So if dad's heroin use disorder is such that he's in and out of the house, he disappears, he's not available, mom's working, she really needs somebody to watch the kids. Maybe the eldest daughter is not only parentified, but she becomes kind of the family hero, and mom needs her to be the family hero. She needs her to be dependent and reliable and responsible. And there's going to be pressure to stay in that role. Maybe the 12-year-old one day, I don't know, she acts out. She's sick of it. She goes to her friend's house after school, and she doesn't, go meet her little sister and hold her hand and get her on the bus and get her home. And mom loses it, right? And says, "What are you doing? You're my responsible one. I need you to do this. The family depends upon you to be responsible." And so what's happening is the family hero in this case is getting a lot of pressure to conform to being the family hero. Many times the family hero provides a sense of worth to the family, a sense of pride and success and hope. Somebody's doing something well. They're often successful at work, school, or sports. And you can see how this might happen, right? So Same scenario, mom, 12-year-old daughter who's a family hero, taking care of the kids. Dad's out there doing his thing in and out of the family. Mom has an old friend, hasn't talked to her for a couple of years. The old friend reaches out to her and calls and says, hey, probably text nowadays, but anyway, like reaches out and says, hey, let's get together. And so like, let's catch up. What's been going on? Like, tell me what's happening. Well, mom's probably not going to lead with, well, the husband's out there doing heroin, and really causing a lot of problems. Mom's probably going to lead with like, oh, I mean, the family's doing good. Wow, like, Maria's doing fantastic. She is just my little trooper. She is so helpful with the kids, and she's getting A's in school. And what's happening there is by having somebody in the family hero role, it gives us somebody to point to and say, look, our family's okay, right? Or it's not all bad. All right, on the flip side of the hero is the scapegoat. So the scapegoat is usually the person that the family identifies as the problem person, and they focus all their negative or they focus on their negative or difficult behavior. Sometimes the scapegoat is the substance user. Sometimes, especially if the family is trying to avoid focusing on the substance user, it's not. But what it does is it gives the family somebody to blame for the dysfunction in the family without actually addressing, right, other real problems that are in the family system. So the scapegoat in the family system often attracts a lot of attention, and all the anger and resentment that might be in the family system. So let's go back. I'm going to add to my scenario. So mom's got the alcohol use disorder. Dad's the chief enabler, not saying anything when she crashes the car. The eldest son has become kind of a parentified family hero. He's dad's companion, gives dad somebody to talk to, takes on some of the roles in the family that are needed. But let's add another child. Let's say that there's a daughter in there. There's a 17-year-old son and there's a 15-year-old daughter. And, the 15-year-old daughter is really struggling. Mom's, there's dysfunction in the family. Mom's alcoholism is obvious. Mom and dad seem like there's a lot of tension. They're not really getting along. And, she's sensitive to this. And, maybe she's, drinking herself earlier. She's going out with her friends. She's acting out in some way, or she's not as good a student as, her older brother is. What may happen in this family is dad and mom and even older brother might turn on her and really focus on where she's failing and how she's not successful. Maybe she goes out drinking with her friends, right, and is caught, and dad goes crazy about it. Like, what are you doing? You're 15. How can you be drinking? Yada, yada. The same dad who pretty much ignores the fact that his wife is developing an alcohol use disorder and crashing the car into stop signs, right? Like really just lays it on his daughter. So that would be an example where the scapegoat isn't the substance user, but the scapegoat is somebody that the family can focus on and dump all of their negative energy onto. Now, let's go back to what we talked about with family roles, or really any role where there's a pressure to conform to the role. And there's been a lot of interesting research and work done with children who are scapegoats in families where there's substance use, and how they grow up. And what happens is they start to believe the projection. The person who's thrust into the scapegoat role often starts to think they are difficult or problematic. And what that can do is intensify the acting out behaviors, because the scapegoat's feeling lonely and hurt and rejected, angry, defiant. Then acting out might be a way of expressing these feelings. Oftentimes, the scapegoat tends to seek approval from peers rather than the family system. They're not getting any love from the family system, so they start looking for love from their peers. And Claudia Black talked a lot about how scapegoats tend to find each other. So different scapegoats from different families tend to hook up. They identify, with the difficulties that they're going through. And they often become adolescent drug and alcohol users themselves. All right. For those of you who are watching this video as part of the Family Dynamics course at San Diego City College that you are receiving credit for, this is the key word or key phrase non sequitur. So you are going to be tested upon the conclusion of this video, and one of the questions is going to ask for the key word or the key phrase. This key word or phrase will not be on the PowerPoint slides, and only the student who actually watches the video lecture is going to know what the key word or phrase is. So the key phrase for this video is scapegoats have feelings too. Again, the key phrase is scapegoats, SCAPEGOATS, scapegoats have feelings too. All right, now back to the lecture. All right, so the mascot role. The mascot acts like the family clown. So the mascot role provides fun and humor and a distraction for the family in some way. This performance can temporarily lessen anxiety and conflict in the family system. It's as if, like, as tension is starting to build, you know, the mascot comes in and starts cracking jokes, right, or goofs off in some way, and it breaks the tension and it allows the family to kind of laugh. So the mascot role can be a really important role in a family system for lessening tension or giving a certain type of distraction. But the distraction here is fun and humor. And so the mascot is often a very charming child, but mascots often grow up with this unhealthy need for approval from others. The distractor is very similar to the mascot. They're just not as much fun. So the distractor attempts to distract and refocus communications away from any possible conflict or discussion of feelings by any means necessary. So sometimes what will happen is the distractor will refocus communications by changing the subject. Maybe, mom and dad are sitting, we'll use the example of 17-year-old son, 15-year-old daughter. Let's say the 17-year-old son, instead of being the family hero role, is in the distractor role. And so mom and dad and 17-year-old son, 15-year-old daughter are there at the table, and, mom is drinking and dad says, "Mom, going for another drink, I see," right? And there's an edge in his voice. And suddenly the son says, "Oh, hey, so dad, I totally forgot to tell you, so you know that shop class I'm taking at school? So one of the guys was saying that you should, I don't know, turn the widget right rather than turn the widget left." Dad says, "What?" He says, "Turn it right? That's stupid. Like, you totally need to, turn it this way." Right. And what's happening is this distractor role is sensing the tension in the family system, and this child has been conditioned to act to distract. Sometimes the distractor will engage in totally tangential or irrelevant stories to distract. Maybe in the family system, there's an argument that's developing. Mom and dad are really irritated, about the 15-year-old daughter's getting a D, in her biology class, and tension's rising, and what's the matter with you, and why don't you study? And maybe the distractor's like, "Hey, when I was coming home from school today, I looked in the creek and I saw there was a turtle there," right? Totally tangential and irrelevant to what the topic is, but it's designed to try and distract from the conversation. So the distractor can be a people pleaser, or they can sometimes be irreverent and sarcastic. Either way, what they're doing is they're using this distraction to break tension. And oftentimes the distractor acts like they don't care or they're not affected by whatever's happening in the family system, which is not true, but looks that way on the surface. Okay, the lost child role. The person who's in the lost child role tends to avoid conflict whenever possible. Really good at anticipating and avoiding problematic interactions by seeking little attention, staying really low, or withdrawing from the family. Maybe the 15-year-old's in the lost child role, and the 17-year-old's in the scapegoat role, and now there's an argument happening in the living room, and the 15-year-old just quietly and slowly disappears into her bedroom, shuts the door, and opens up a romance novel or something. So the lost child tends to stay low, disappear, don't draw attention to yourself. Typically, people in the lost child role are quiet and independent, often shy with few friends. To reach out and make friends requires a certain amount of assertiveness, and there's often fear about drawing too much attention to yourself, often tend to be followers and fear taking risks, and lost children may spend an inordinate time engaged in fantasy as a daydreamer. All right, Virginia Satir called this role the super reasonable or the computer. The person who's in the super reasonable or the super rational, sometimes you'll see it named that. When they're in that role, the response to conflict is to be logical, rational, and overly intellectual. The super reasonable is cut off from their own feelings, often don't feel them. Any discussion or expression of negative feelings is downplayed and dismissed or avoided. They tend to ignore complaints and justify dysfunctional family communications and conflict. I've seen this before when I've been working with families where a person seems unaffected. They're sitting in my family counseling session and there's really no expression on their face. And I may make a platform for that person and say, you know, so Raul, you've been sitting here for the last 10, 15 minutes. The family has been talking about some pretty intense things here. And obviously your sister has strong feelings about it. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about this. How do you see mom's drinking and how it's impacted the family, and what are you feeling? And Raul says, well, I don't have anything to say. I mean, I get it. Mom's drinking obviously got out of control, but she's here in therapy, so I don't know. I don't really have anything to say. Right? And it's odd. It's cut off from the feelings. It's kind of this, no problem here, right? I don't have anything to share. And although the super reasonable seems calm, usually inside there's all kinds of anxiety and vulnerability. And then the placator. So the placator acts as the mediator in the family. So whereas the distractor will tend to distract by like, hey, squirrel, look over here, you know, rather than focusing on the problem, the placator tends to jump into the issue and block communication between family members with a goal from keeping the situation from escalating, acting like as a type of a mediator. So many times the placator does this like, I'm sorry, like, I'm sure I had something to do with this, or would it be okay with, and what they're trying to do is please other people. They're trying to drop tension by kind of thrusting themselves in the middle of this. One of the things that they may do is anticipate attacks without protest, and it's a way of kind of avoiding rejection. You know, you're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. So the example here, you know, maybe, let's see, using my same family example, something important gets lost. Car keys are lost, right? So dad is like, where are the car keys? You know, mom's like, I don't know. Why are you asking me? Because you probably put them somewhere. You know, like you're constantly getting in the car and you're driving drunk and you don't know what you're doing. And like, I do not. Why would you say something like this? Right. So the argument's starting to get up, and maybe the placator jumps in and says, well, dad, I think they might be like in the ignition. You know, I don't know. Maybe it was me. Maybe I'm the one that drove the car last. I'm not sure. Like, but you know, I think yeah, I think I did that. I was out looking. I thought I left my school books in there. I went out in the car. I don't know why I put the key in the ignition. I'm sorry, Dad, but it's out there. And so what's happening is they're jumping in. They're acting as a mediator. They're trying to block this from escalating. And then the blamer is the last role that we'll talk about here. The blamer tends to adapt to the dysfunction in the family by identifying everyone and everything else as the problem. So the blamer is trying to control the situation and control others by essentially having the answers for everything, labeling other people, right, blaming everybody for what's going on. And what it's doing is it serves to deflect from attention being brought upon themselves. You know, I don't know, I didn't have anything to do with this, you know, like, I mean, it's you who didn't do this. It's this person that didn't do this. They're often bossy, fault finding, name calling, critical of others, with this fear of things being out of control. So it often comes up with people coming out of these unstable family situations where the way that the person copes is to point their finger at everybody else. Everybody else is causing problems and screwing things up. So the treatment for the dysfunctional family roles is complicated. So for the drug and alcohol counselor who's doing family counseling in a substance use treatment facility, providing psychoeducation about the family roles can be really super helpful. Claudia Black actually publishes a book of family exercises for families in substance use treatment. Let me see here. I don't know where it is on my bookshelf right now. There it is. Family strategies, practical tools for professionals treating families impacted by addiction. So again, the book is called Family Strategies by Claudia Black. She provides a whole bunch of worksheets and ways to talk about certain topics with families and substance use treatment. And she has a good exercise in there about the family roles and helping people identify their family roles and how it both serves them and it causes them tension. So that's one thing that you can do, is provide psychoeducation. You can certainly help to change the damaging environment that caused the family roles to develop in the first place. Improving family communication patterns, the clear communication part of this, being able to talk about one's feelings, being able to address things directly can go a long way towards loosening some of the restrictiveness of these family roles. When children are in these roles, encouraging them to be themselves, facilitating the expressions of emotions. Many times, though, this probably is going to benefit from a referral to a child or marriage family therapist, a mental health clinician. Marriage family therapists, or MFTs, and child therapists have a lot of training in family systems, which includes things like family roles. And being stuck in a role like this for many years, it can be really hard to break out of that. So we can definitely address it directly and try to change the scenario that's in the situation at home, but a referral is often also beneficial. For children and adolescents, a referral to child or adolescent therapy can really help. So when kids are thrust in this role, I'm talking about children and adolescents up to probably age 14, 15, 16, getting some kind of child adolescent therapy to understand that they're not alone, that, the addiction is not their fault, that they don't have to be in these types of roles, that can be really helpful. In particular, research indicates that teenagers and older children, usually like age 8 to 11, can benefit from group therapy with other children that have been in these roles. Sometimes you can find things like this through Alateen, which is the Al-Anon branch for teenagers and adolescents and pre-adolescents. Be a great opportunity to talk with other children that have been in these roles and see that it's not their fault and understand a bit about why they developed. Young children generally don't benefit from talk therapy, but if you had a young child, a child who's 5, 6, 7 years old, who seems to be, showing signs of being in one of these roles, they can really benefit from child therapy, which often includes art therapy, to help draw out these topics. So as a drug and alcohol counselor, again, these are going to be referrals that you're going to put out. Okay, let's shift over to talking about family relational boundaries. So boundaries is another one of those words like codependency that could mean a lot of things. So when we're talking about family relational boundaries, for the purposes of this lecture and most of what we're doing in our work with families, what we're talking about is the interaction between family members. So a boundary, a relational boundary, is a type of interaction between family members. A boundary certainly can be a physical boundary as well, like this is my room, versus your room. Many times, adolescents, young adolescents in particular, it's very normal developmentally to start to feel very territorial about my room and my door, and no, you're not allowed to enter. So that is a type of boundary. What we're talking about more there is a physical boundary. So most of the time, in this lecture and most of the work that we do in working with families, what we're really concerned about are relational boundaries, or how individual family members interact with each other. And in that case, a boundary really defines what's okay in our interactions. So this is an okay type of interaction between the two of us, or what's not okay. This is a not okay type of interaction between the two of us. Now, all family systems have relational boundaries, whether they're healthy family systems or dysfunctional family systems. They interact with each other, and there's an understanding of what types of interactions are okay and what types of interactions are not okay. So these relational boundaries define appropriate behavior between people in the family system. And they're often based on family roles, not just the dysfunctional family roles, but what your role is in the family. So appropriate behavior between people. Let's say, for example, I teach in the Alcohol and Other Drug Studies program at San Diego City College. Let's say that the dean comes to me and says, Keith, I'm so sorry, but funding has been cut and we're going to have to fold the Alcohol and Other Drug Studies program. After this semester, you're no longer going to have a job here, right? So that would be stressful and distressing. And so totally appropriate for me to go home and to say to my wife, oh my God, the dean talked to me today, like, I'm not going to have my job at the college. I don't know what we're going to do about money. You know, we just refinanced the house. Like, I'm freaking out, right? Totally cool, because in role, right, husband, wife, you know, parents, totally okay to talk about this. Not appropriate for me to go to my 9-year-old's room and say, oh my God, daddy's just lost his job and I don't know what to do. I'm really worried we're going to lose the house, right? So it's the same exact behavior. But here, what's appropriate with one person is not appropriate with another person in the same exact family system, based on the role that people are in the family. So relational boundaries define appropriate behavior between people in the family. They regulate or control the types of interactions between family members. There'll be relational boundaries about communication, what you can say, you know, in a family system, whether you're allowed to talk about that. You know, it's totally okay for you. I'm talking to my child, right? I'm talking to my son. It's totally okay for you to be mad with me. I'm cool with that. You cannot swear at me. Like, if you swear at me again, right, then I'm going to stop this conversation. That's a relational boundary. What I'm doing is I'm regulating or controlling the type of interaction that's okay. Relational boundaries about affection. So how do we show affection in this family system or not show affection in this family system? You know, in some family systems, dads are hugging their adolescent boys and their adolescent boys are hugging them back, and everybody's cool with it. And it's a loving family and hugs are great. Right. In other family systems, you know, dad, about the time that the young boy turns about 8 years old, stops hugging him. And by the time that, you know, the young boy's 13 years old, dad now is shaking hands and would never hug his son, because that's not appropriate between men in this family system. Right. So that would be a type of boundary that's regulating or controlling affection or physical expressions. Boundaries also differentiate one person from another. You know, this is okay for me. This is not okay for you. Again, talking about control over physical space. This is my bedroom. And the important thing is that boundaries, healthy boundaries, should be clear and flexible, meaning that the boundaries are stable, they're understood by everybody, but they're adaptable for different circumstances. Now, there are some dysfunctional family boundaries that we see. Enmeshed means that the family members are too close. There's a smothering relationship. You know, there's a type of codependency. I don't know what to do, right? I need your, well, I don't know what to do could also be a weak boundary, but, you know, I need to discuss this, you know, with my mom. I don't know what to do without my mom. You know, we're kind of codependent like this. You know, sometimes you see this, you know, parents and children, the parent doesn't give their adolescent or their teenager space, which is developmentally needed. And there's this, like, you should tell your mother everything. Like, I want to know everything you're doing. Parents trying to hang out with their teenager's friends and their teenager. That's the type of too close boundary. A disengaged boundary is being aloof or too far or emotionally distant. Rigid boundaries usually mean there's no relating, right? There's like a wall in between the two people, so there's not very much interaction. Sometimes you see this in blended families, where maybe the step parent doesn't have a biological relationship with the child, and that ends up then becoming a relational boundary too, where there's a wall or a cutoff. And then really weak boundaries. You'll often see this with people who really, they don't know what they are, they don't know who they are, they don't know what their value system is. They need somebody to tell them, what it is that they need to do. Now, rules and boundaries seem similar, but they're different. So family rules are dictating, behaviors in the family system, like be home on time, don't piss off grandpa, you're going to trigger his rage. When mom's loaded, go to your room, take control of the situation because nobody else will. Those are rules. Family boundaries are examples of, like, you try to hug your dad and he pushes you away. Mom tries to be your best friend and tells you about her sex life and her fantasies. Your parents don't discuss family finances with the kids. Those are boundaries. So what you're seeing is that the boundaries regulate interactions between members. The rules tend to dictate the behaviors that are acceptable in the family system. All right, a special kind of relational boundary or interaction are family alliances, as well as triangulation in a family system. So family alliances are a type of bonding or a partnering between family members for mutual benefit. That doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. It simply means that two or more of the family members have become like a little subsystem within the family system. So they've partnered up. Many times this is used in dysfunctional family systems and families where there's a substance use disorder as a way to maintain homeostasis or lessen tension without addressing the issue. Many times family alliances provide support between family members, or they provide influence, right? Two of us versus you, we have more influence in this. You'll see this amongst children sometimes. There might be 3 kids in the family and 2 of the children form an alliance with each other, leaving the third one out. And they're able to, like, well, we think this way, you're not a part of us. So there could be an alliance for influence there. Sometimes for protection, that's not just like the power in numbers, but also adopting authority. So like if, the daughter has become parentified and she's the family hero and the father's really depending upon her in some way, that can create an alliance. And what that does is provide some protection and some power for the daughter because she has this close alliance with her father. Sometimes alliances are used as justification to win arguments. Mom said, right, I can do this, or to scapegoat another family member. So alliances are something for us to be aware of when we see these little subsystems in a family system. And going all the way back to the beginning of the presentation, we first need to identify what it is. It's an alliance. Then we need to try and figure out, well, why did this alliance develop? Is it healthy or is it dysfunctional? And how is it affecting the family system as a whole? Then triangulation. Triangulation happens when 2 people have a communication problem, which is unstable or it's not working, right? There's a problem with communication between 2 people, and they compensate by bringing in or enabling a third member in an attempt to break the tension. So the third person is usually pushed to mediate or to take sides or to act as a go-between. So one of the classic triangulation scenarios is when parents go through a divorce and there's children or a child in the family system. So, mom and dad are not getting along with each other at all. And so there's a communication problem between the 2 of them. And what's happened, and maybe the child has split visitation, right? Lives with mom during the week, stays with dad during the weekends. And so what's happening is, dad is saying, well, you tell your mother when you go home, that, that her lawyer contacted me, about child payment and I made that payment, right? And so the child goes home and says, Mom, well, dad says that, he doesn't want the lawyer contacting him because he said that he did make the payment. Oh, no, he didn't. And you tell him, like, if he keeps playing games with me, then I'm taking him back to court and he'll lose his driver's license. And the child goes back and says, well, Dad, so Mom said, right? So you can see the problem here. So the third person is in a very poor position when there's triangulation. So the problem between the 2 people is getting filtered into that third person. The third person can play the role of a substitute, for direct communication. Sometimes the third person, can be used as an authority figure, going back to, but Mom said, here we're seeing, two siblings are arguing with each other and they go racing up to mom to say, Mom, you said I could do this, and, or you didn't say I could do this. And so mom essentially is being brought in to break the tension between the two of them. Sometimes the third person is the messenger of true feelings and issues, meaning they tell each person what the pair cannot say to each other. Maybe, I don't know, maybe dad and, a child are arguing about some issue. The child's been grounded and dad's really angry. And so what mom does is she goes into the child's room and says, I'm sorry, honey, like, your dad really, really loves you. He's just upset because he's so worried about you. Right now, no, it doesn't feel that way. No, I know it is. Like he tells me all the time how much he loved you. Right. And then mom goes into the bedroom and she's talking to dad and she's like, honey, look, I understand that you're upset, but it's not that big a deal. And so what's happening here is mom's sort of this messenger of the feelings and issues between the two of them. Sometimes you see the victim persecutor role. So one family member will be persecuting another family member. They're being mean to that family member. They're bullying that family member. They're arguing with that family member, and the other family member is not fighting back, right? They're in the victim role, and a third family member jumps in and protects the victim and attacks the persecutor. So that's an example of a third. And sometimes what will happen is the scapegoat gets stuck in that third role. Maybe, I'm really angry with my wife. We're not communicating very well. There's all this tension between the two of us, and then my, teenage son comes home and he smells like cigarette smoke. And I say, were you smoking out there again? I told you you're not allowed to smoke, definitely not in the basement. And then my wife's like, God, like, what are you doing? Why are you smoking? It's unhealthy for you. And so we're both really dumping on our son. And the reason why we're doing that is because we have this tension between the two of us that we can't resolve. And we're sort of using then this third person as a scapegoat to lessen the tension between the two of us. So the bottom line is that triangulation often shows up in dysfunctional family systems to try and maintain homeostasis. And it is very stressful for the third person who is in that role. Now, triangulation develops because it can reduce emotional tension between two conflicting members in the family, right? They're having a hard time communicating about something. So that's why the triangulation showed up in the first place. But typically, if you're seeing triangulation in a family system, it means that the conflict's not being resolved. So whatever that tension is, isn't being fixed when you bring the third person in. It maintains a state of dysfunctional homeostasis. And it's also a missed opportunity to develop better communication skills and increase intimacy between the family members that are having a problem with each other. So to fix triangulation, it requires direct communication between the two people who are struggling to communicate with each other, and the third person has to be removed out of that role of being the messenger. Now, let's talk about this clinically as a drug and alcohol counselor. So there's two important things here as triangulation relates to us. So we're going to try to identify triangulation in the family system. So if we see three people in the family system, three or more, and triangulation happening, same thing. What is it? It's triangulation. Why is it happening? How's it affecting the rest of the family members? What can we do about that? But sometimes the counselor is going to get pulled in. So triangulation often happens in substance use treatment where you are drawn into triangulation between two or more family members, and it can also happen where you're drawn in between two or more clients. So the classic example of this with family members is you're seeing a couple, right? So it's the husband is in treatment, the wife comes for a family session, and there's a lot of tension between the two of them, and they're not even looking at each other. They're talking about each other to you. So the husband's like, yeah, well, she doesn't understand because she's never used heroin before, and I've been trying, to do this, and she doesn't get it. That relapse sometimes is a part of treatment, and I'm back in treatment, and she's being totally unfair. And the wife says, well, He obviously is the one that chose to pick up the heroin in the first place. And it seems to me that by saying that relapse is part of the process, then he's just given himself more excuse to go out and use. So what's happening is they're upset with each other, but they're pulling you in, right? And they're talking to you and communicating to you about each other. So again, the issue here is that while it may lessen tension somewhat, it puts you in a really disadvantageous position, and it's not helping to deal with the problem. So what we're going to have to do in that situation is try to get them to talk directly to each other and get ourselves out of that position. But it'll also happen sometimes with clients. So two clients in your treatment program may have an issue with each other. And one of them comes running into your office to complain about the other one, right? And then the other one sees you in the hallway and they complain about the other one. And it's the same exact phenomenon where they're not addressing it with each other and they're pulling you in as the third. So this isn't going to get fixed until you can get the two individuals to address each other directly, and they may need some sort of help or mediation to communicate appropriately, but that's how you break the triangle, is you put it back on the two people, the two or more people where the tension exists. So when you are stuck in the position of the third, it's a trap. Don't fall into it. A really big part of treatment, substance use treatment, entails counseling clients to learn how to improve their relationships by asserting themselves, setting good boundaries, and dealing with confrontation, learning how to address things directly. Many times in the past, people who developed substance use disorders, when they had interpersonal conflict and they didn't know how to deal with it, they probably used instead of dealing with it. And so we need to teach them how to do this. And so when you're caught in triangulation, whether it's between family members or clients, your best response is to put it back. Have you addressed it with them directly? What are you hoping is going to happen by telling me this? Redirect them to talk to each other. Do you need help or support to talk with the other person about this? A big part of working a program of recovery entails addressing issues directly. How can I help the two of you come to a resolution with this? You get the idea. You get out of the third person chair and you re-engage between the two people. All right, so to finish up with this then, I have just addressed some key family dynamics. There are definitely many more dynamics than just the ones that I've talked about in today's presentation. But what do you do about them when you see them? So the most important thing is you need to talk about the family dynamics that you're seeing when you're working with a family. So again, going back to the beginning of the lecture, you ask open-ended questions to clarify what's happening. Like, what is the dynamic? Why might this be happening? How is this affecting everybody? You need to share your observations. Most of the time when you're seeing dynamics, the family isn't identifying themselves. You're not going to have a family sit down and you have mom say like, one thing we should talk about is I really dominate all the conversation and I don't let anybody else answer questions. Right? That's not going to happen. You may notice that mom is doing that, at which point you need to share your observation that this is happening in the family system. You make interpretations. I'm noticing here Alexi, that you often seem to jump in when your mom and dad start arguing. And it seems like maybe that's an important role for you in this family. I'm wondering if you do this in part because it feels like maybe people are getting angry and it's getting a little tense in here, and you're trying to help the situation by kind of mediating, right, between mom and dad. So I'm making an interpretation about what I'm seeing. Most importantly, though, we need to get the family to talk about it. So whenever we see these dynamics, we need to bring them up so that we can start talking about the dynamics. Because if we don't talk about the dynamics that we are seeing, they're not going to probably bring them up to each other. And then if nothing changes, nothing changes. So it is very important that we help them develop awareness and communication about these dynamics, their experiences and feelings in relationships. Identifying family dynamics may not be nice or polite, but it's crucial for healing. I talk about this a lot when I'm teaching at the college here at San Diego City College, that every single person sitting in the classroom has been conditioned not to bring up certain things when you see it, because it's not polite, or we don't bring that up with strangers, we don't talk about certain things. That is something we've all been conditioned to. The problem is when you're doing therapy and counseling and treatment, you're not in a position of being nice, right? This isn't the nice neighbor role. This is a counseling role. And so we have to be able to bring these things up and talk about it, even if it may not be nice or polite. Now, research shows most families report that identifying the dynamics in the family system actually makes it feel more manageable, meaning when you start talking about it, it feels like something you can actually do something about versus just this thing that's causing problems that I feel overwhelmed by. So the goal in talking about family dynamics is to facilitate a plan for improvement. Or at least some kind of resolution, if not the final solution. This is a solution-focused approach. Okay, so we see this issue. We understand why this issue developed, but it's causing stress in the family system. So let's talk about what we can do to improve this situation. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I see the dynamic, I talk about the dynamic, I ask questions about the dynamic. Now we're going to address how we can improve that dynamic. So just to summarize, most of the family dynamics you're going to see through observation of the family members' interactions with each other. Once you identify those dynamics, you bring them into the discussion. You share your observations, you invite discussion about it, you ask whether this should be included in the treatment plan, and then you start working on the solutions. All right, so that concludes our discussion on identifying and assessing for key family dynamics in a family system. If you have any questions about this and you are watching this video on YouTube, you can make a comment or contact me through the YouTube. If you're taking this class through San Diego City College and you have my email, then you can contact me, or if you have a class with me, we can talk about it in class. Thanks so much for listening.